We have some more signings from NHL Free Agent Frenzy to discuss, plus the first overall pick in the 2020 draft, Alexis Lafreniere, has signed his ELC. We'll discuss all the details coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. We continue to have a flurry of more signings here as NHL Free Agent Frenzy continues. Obviously things are a little bit different this year. Usually we have a lot of signings between the first day or two, and then it kind of starts to taper off and you have a little bit more, kind of very gradual. But given the market of the NHL right now and where everything is, a lot of these free agents are taking more time than usual to sign contracts. There's still a fair bit of fairly big names out there. I mean, obviously a lot of the top ones now that we've seen Pietrangelo and Hall sign that should open up the market and kind of dictate what a lot of the other players that kind of come in the next tier will start to get. So I would imagine we'll start to see more of those players sign, but still lots of names out there. So stay tuned for a lot more videos just like this one. But first up, we have Alexis Lafreniere, the 2020 first overall selection to the New York Rangers, has put pen to paper and signed his entry-level contract. Now, of course, he got the standard cap hit that comes with ELCs, $925,000, but of course, he has an opportunity to earn a lot more money than that, given a lot of Schedule A and Schedule B bonuses. So the total value of the contract over the 3 years has the potential to hit $11.325 million. So normally, obviously, a lot of the top players that are selected in the draft get these types of contracts, and I would suspect Lafreniere will certainly be performing at a high level right away. I would suspect he'll have a lot of success out of the gates here, so we will see. But certainly the Rangers will have to plan for that, as I'm sure they are with their salary cap situation. Obviously, in the after year one, there could be bonus overages that'll impact their cap the year after and the year after that until he gets into his next contract. So certainly good news, though, for the Rangers to get this guy officially a part of the organization. I believe right now the plan is that he's not going to be going back to junior. He's going to stay with the Rangers and train with them and get ready for the NHL season. It's believed if the NHL season is delayed beyond January the 1st, so if it ends up being later in January or February 1st as a start time for the next season, that he could be loaned to Team Canada for the World Junior Championships, which will be taking place in the Edmonton bubble setup at its normal time here, starting on Boxing Day. So we could see a lot of top players like Lafreniere be in that tournament. Obviously, a lot of that depends, though, on their teams loaning them out to go. So we'll see. It has a lot of potential, though, to have a lot of top players that we wouldn't have expected to be there otherwise. The Philadelphia Flyers have signed defenseman Erik Gustafsson to a one-year contract at $3 million. Of course, Gustafsson was formerly of the Chicago Blackhawks, ended up being traded and spending some time with the Calgary Flames last year. They become an unrestricted free agent, now goes over to Philadelphia. Obviously, the Flyers had Matt Niskanen up and leave unexpectedly through retirement, so I don't really expect him to replace Niskanen. He's a very different kind of defenseman. The Flyers also could still trade Shane Gostisbehere, and that's certainly something that I'm not sure if we're going to see or not. I mean, he has a very, a reasonable contract, so that will be easier to trade than many of the other ones that we've seen around the NHL have been rumored to be on the move. However, Gustafsson certainly can provide the offense. He can play on the power play. Like I said, he's a good puck mover. Not real great in his own end, though. So it's a short-term contract. We'll see how things work, and we'll see if he ends up sticking around longer-term in Philly, but that could be dictated by, how he plays and what other moves they make on their blue line. The Chicago Blackhawks have signed a pair of depth forwards who will likely play in their bottom six, including Lucas Wallmark and Mattias Janmark. Of course, Lucas Wallmark mostly played in the NHL with the Carolina Hurricanes, but was moved and had played some with the Florida Panthers. He was involved in that Vincent Trocheck trade last season, and of course, he gets 1 year at $750,000. Where we have Mattias Janmark, formerly of the Stanley Cup finalists, the Dallas Stars, signs a 1 year contract at $2.25 million. Not really surprising that either of these players were available through free agency just because of cap constraints. Janmark very well could be a pretty solid bottom six player who can play in the penalty kill and be a defensive type player for them. He will get some offense out of Janmark, but not a ton. Obviously, Dallas was interested in bringing him back, but Chicago able to offer him more money, but both short-term deals. As we know, the Chicago Blackhawks seem like they're going through a bit of a retool here after trading Brendan Saad. They let Corey Crawford go. It was a different-looking team, and we've heard from the Blackhawks core in a recent interview with The Athletic. Jonathan Toews made it known that they were not real pleased with how things have been handled, and they come to camp every year trying their best to be prepared to win a Stanley Cup. And it looks as though the team's heading in a different direction that they were kind of caught off guard by and were not real pleased. So I would say that Stan Bowman needs to be having some discussions here with his captain and with his core members of the team. Of course, wouldn't be shocking. We don't have any rumors to suggest that any of them have asked to be moved out, of course, at this point. And I'd be incredibly shocked if they ever traded Taves or Kane. And I think the only way that would ever happen would be if they requested it. But I could see them maybe looking to move additional forwards as well, like a Duncan Keith, for example, in the back end. There's been a lot of interest in him before, but he does control his fate with a no-move clause. So we'll see what Chicago is up to, but it looks as though with a lot of their signings, they want shorter-term contracts and trying to see how the next year or two goes as they start kind of retooling and rebuilding here for the future. But they do have a lot of great prospects, which is kind of surprising. But these signings, like I said, they're shorter-term deals with low risk, and we'll see how they work out. They could become longer-term pieces in the Blackhawks organization. The New York Islanders have signed former Calgary Flames Austin Czarnik to a 2-year contract, $725K. It's a two-way deal as well. I think there's a pretty decent chance Czarnik could see some NHL time, but he could also end up in the American Hockey League and some of these other prospects to kind of have some cheaper contracts in there to offset everything from a cap perspective and gain more opportunity. The Nashville Predators have signed veteran forward Brad Richardson to a 1-year deal, $1 million, the standard 1-year, $1 million deal for veterans. Obviously, Richardson, formerly of the Arizona Coyotes, played with the Arizona Coyotes for a fair bit of time. A pretty good character guy. Nothing that you're going to get too flashy, but you're going to get good leadership. Good solid hard play every shift, and somebody you can count on to kind of lead by example. Obviously, the Predators are trying to change things up here a little bit. We saw them buy out Kyle Turris. We saw them let Craig Smith go to free agency. It's rumored right now that they're also looking for a bit of a forward who can score some goals. So maybe a guy like a Mike Hoffman, for example, that might be a player that wouldn't be shocking if they sign, or at least I would imagine they're at the very least having conversations with. Maybe reuniting Hoffman with Matt Duchene. They played well together in their time in Ottawa, even though it was somewhat brief. They did seem to have pretty decent chemistry, but they could certainly need to add more scoring, which is what they're rumored to be looking at. Be interesting to see what else they do. But Brad Richardson is not a bad player to add to your mix here to kind of shore up your bottom six. They also moved out Austin Watson, brought in Nick Cousins, so obviously David Poile, trying to shake things up here a little bit and get a different mix of players heading into next year. Carolina Hurricanes have signed defenseman Joakim Ryan to a 1-year contract at a league minimum $700,000. It's also a 2-way contract. I was a little surprised that Ryan didn't get a 1-way deal. I thought he's had enough NHL time and games that maybe that would be possible, but either way, another depth piece. We saw them lose Trevor Van Riemsdyk to free agency, but at the same time, the Hurricanes want to create more opportunity for guys like Hayden Fleury and Jake Bean. I would really hope Jake Bean gets an NHL shot this year. He's more than earned it based on how he's played in the American Hockey League. So no offense to Ryan, but I would hope that Bean would get the nod over a player like him, which is probably why they offered up a 2-way deal. Somebody who can play in their minor leagues, be like the first call-up option. Somebody who's got some NHL experience under their belt, who can come in based on injuries or different needs as the season goes along. We saw last year with the Hurricanes end up with a pretty battered and beat up blue line, which at one point was arguably one of the better blue lines in the NHL, but then they started falling like flies with injuries, and they were certainly in a rough spot there, which made them go out and acquire at the deadline. So if they have a guy like Ryan, even though he might play in the American Hockey League, it certainly adds to their depth and kind of creates the less likely chance that they need to do something like that at the next coming deadline. The Minnesota Wild have signed goaltender Kaapo Kähkönen to a 2-year contract. It's a 2-way deal as well, $750,000. Obviously, he appears to be Minnesota's goaltender of the future right now. Difficult to say if he will be in Minnesota next year or where exactly he will end up playing. He could start in the minors. He could be the backup. I think there's still some moving parts there in Minnesota. But I do see him, at this point at least, being their goalie of the future. So obviously they moved on from Devin Dubnyk. We'll see what other opportunities he can kind of create for himself this year, but he's had some solid time so far in the minors and a pretty low-risk contract to keep him around and see if he does indeed develop into being that guy. I know Bill Guerin seemed to be a little reluctant to put too much pressure on him heading into next year, so we'll see. Maybe he splits time between the two levels this coming year, and within the second year of the contract, maybe he ends up being full-time in the NHL. That's something that would not surprise me at all. He's a very talented goalie with a lot of potential here for the future. And the biggest contract we're talking about here today is Colorado Avalanche re-signing defenseman and restricted free agent Ryan Graves, who gets a 3-year deal, just over $3 million per season, which I think is a pretty fair a pretty solid deal for the blue liner here. Of course, they pretty much got him for nothing from the New York Rangers. The Rangers have been basically a defense factory with a lot of their top prospects here in the last number of years. They have a lot in their current NHL lineup that they've drafted or picked up through trade. And Graves was essentially not off to a fantastic start with his development. Come out of the QMJHL, goes into the American Hockey League system here with the Rangers organization in Hartford. Spent 3 years there. Never really developed into somebody they saw as being a part of their future. They swapped him with the Avalanche for another prospect who has never really developed anything on the Rangers side, and now Graves has turned into a pretty regular, solid defenseman for the Avalanche. They have one of the best young blue line cores here in the NHL. Obviously, you have guys ahead of them like Cale Makar and Samuel Girard. Girard's already got his long-term contract. You got Graves now on a 3-year deal. Makar's likely going to take a long-term deal when it comes time for that here as well. And of course, they picked up Devon Toews from the New York Islanders here too. So they have a lot of really solid young blue lines and more on the way with Bowen Byram and Connor Timmins. This Avalanche team is going to be a force to be reckoned with for quite some time, and their blue line is going to be a huge part of that. So Ryan Graves, who hails from the province of Prince Edward Island, has turned out to be a pretty solid defenseman, pretty fair deal, and I think the Avalanche will be quite pleased here with his contract overall. So that is all your updates here for today. I'll likely be back later with more signings. We likely could see a few more trades here today as well, so stay tuned to Top Shelf Hockey. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest NHL news from around the entire league. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.